Wes Moss here. Welcome to Money Matters Live. Today, what the wealthy know about creating wealth that you might be missing. I'm going to go over a couple of numbers here, and this is the most important concept when it comes to investing, and we're all out there trying to figure out a better, more efficient way to build wealth, to be financially independent. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today, because there's a massive, massive difference and a massive mindset difference between those who end up building real wealth and those who never really do. And again, it's rare to be able to build wealth in America. We are the richest nation in the world, yet it's really still that upper 1%, and really not even the upper 1%, but even the upper 0.1 of 0.1% that ends up building this tremendous amount of wealth. And they do it under one relatively simple, or at least straightforward, philosophy or mindset. And that's the difference between being a saver, which in its own right is difficult to do, and being an investor, which is even more difficult to do. And I want to give you a couple of numerical examples and talk about Warren Buffett's most recent letter as an enormously important showcase of the difference between the two. Are you, and start thinking about this today as I talk this through, are you a saver, which is good, or are you an investor, which is infinitely or can be infinitely better? Not just a little better, but massively better. And I want to go through some of these examples. Part of what prompted today's Money Matters Facebook Live, for many years now, I have been talking about and investing in personally in something called with an investment strategy called the Lobby Index, or the Portfolio Opportunity or Policy Opportunity Portfolio. And it's effectively a strategy that identifies companies in the S&P 500 that are very smart about how they operate within Washington, and make sure that the rules, or they try to spend money in a judicious way to figure out and influence lobbying so that it helps their business. So these are companies that effectively get the most out of their lobbying buck, or the most bang for their lobbying buck. And the reason that, and I don't talk a lot about performance as an advisor, because I'm focused on achieving goals and not just maximum performance. I want people to balance their risk. But this is an example of really solid performance. And I've talked about this for a long time, but Barron's this weekend came out and just flat out gave the numbers. Barron's interviewed the lead researcher for the Strategic Policy or Lobbying Index, and very clearly shows in the most recent episode or edition of Barron's, which would have been the April 30th edition, if you will, that the lobbying index, so since 2009, really February of 2009, the S&P 500 is up 308%. That's a wonderful return. But the lobbying index is up 472%. 472%. A massive amount of outperformance due to relative to the general market. $100,000 in the S&P would have grown to about $400,000. In the lobby index would have grown to around $600,000. So we're talking about a $200,000 difference here. Massive, right? And in a world where I see this happening more and more because of index fund investing and Vanguard, which has done a great service to most investors by bringing down the investment costs for investors, which is great. But I also see what I call a Vanguardization of investment mentality, meaning that, there's really no other opportunity except the index. And if I'm an aggressive investor, that's all I do. And that trend towards Vanguardization, or just settling, is a mindset that stops looking for opportunity. And I think when we stop looking for opportunity as investors, that's when we start to lose. So let me remind you, there's the difference between saving and investing. If you're a saver, your goal is to protect your wealth, and that's fine. We all need to have a certain amount of our capital, our savings, that is just our what we have stashed away in just savings. Doesn't necessarily need to grow much. It just needs to be protected. But investor thinks very, very differently. An investor says, I'm never going to give up on looking for opportunity. The thought that 80% of mutual funds underperform the S&P 500, so the only thing I'm ever going to do is the S&P 500. There's merit to that. But what about the other 20%, or the other, and by the way, in the world we live in, 20% is a massive number. Hundreds, or if not thousands, of other options that do better than the market over time. Let me give you an example. The Buffett letter, which I will show you here, shows that since 1965, the S&P 500 with including dividends, as you can see here, all these different years, ended up with an average rate of return of 9.9% over since 1965, 15,508%, a massive rate of return. Now let's look at the total return of Berkshire shares, which have had many years where they did better than the market, some not as good, some worse. Over time, it has averaged 20.9%. for a total return of 2.42,404,700 plus percent. A massive difference when you start getting some outperformance. And let me give you a couple of numbers, put this in the context. If you started with $100,000 52 years ago and it grew at 9.9%, you would end up with how much money? So we're doing an example here of $10,000, 10K, at 9.9% rate of return for 52 years, we end up with how much? $1.35 million. Pretty awesome number. That is a tremendous amount of wealth that is created at just investing in stocks in general. 10,000 turning into over $1 million. So a tremendous amount of wealth created. Now let's think of it as, let's just say you'd been in Omaha and you knew Warren Buffett and you were an early investor in that fund, and you put $10,000 into his company, Berkshire Hathaway, which is effectively a holding company of many different blue chip type companies that has become almost a proxy for mutual funds. And what has that done? Well, it did 20 on average, 20.9%. What's the math on that? Remember, 9.9% got us to 1.35 million. What's this get us to? This gets us to $193 million. What? We're talking about a 100-fold difference for an outperformance. Really, what we're looking at here is the difference between 10% and 20%. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and find the next Buffett or Berkshire Hathaway and you're going to find 20% a year for the next 52 years. Very tall order. Why I'm using this, I want to illustrate the point of the difference that a few percentage points in rate of return can make an enormous difference in your overall net worth. For instance, $100,000 just put in a savings account, or $10,000 just put in a let me redo this. $10,000 put in a savings account over 52 years at 2% equals what? 28 grand. Yeah, it triples over time, but over 5 decades, which just doesn't feel like a lot, does it? This just doesn't feel like a lot versus a market rate of return would have gotten you to 1.35 million. A Warren Buffett rate of return, Berkshire Hathaway, would have ended up at almost $200 million. Just an enormous difference here. And the reason I bring all this up, and every percentage point really matters. So again, savers, protect, don't lose, and that's fine for a portion of your money. Investors are thinking about opportunity and saying, look, I understand that investing comes with some indigestion. It's difficult because markets are very cyclical. We have good years and we have bad years. So it takes a little bit more emotional, it takes a little bit more toll on most people emotionally, but there's a real reward done right at the end of the rainbow to some extent. And it takes time to do that. So remember, if you think in just the saver mentality, that's just the start of really building wealth. If all you do is ever save, most Americans that do that end up in the camp that you would essentially poor. Investing, and if you invest consistently and persistently and with discipline over time, that's where you end up in the wealthy camp. Giant difference between saving and investing. And today's reminder of that, I've showed you a couple of different ways to really look at that. So thank you for tuning in. Find our team and at retiresoonerbook.com. Again, You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think is the book that I talk about some of these same concepts. Again, the website for that is retiresoonerbook.com. Here's the book, of course. Mallory's going to zoom in just a moment. But with that, I appreciate you tuning in. Always more and more to learn. I wish you a profitable rest of your day.